Hey, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the September 17th special meeting, Westerly School Committee. Members present are Ms. Cook, myself, Ms. Bowdy, Mr. Ober, and Ms. Wyckoll. Ms. Dunn should be joining us in a few minutes. She was running a little bit late. Mrs. Cook, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The Westerly Public Schools mission is to create an inspiring, challenging, and supportive environment where students are encouraged and assisted in reaching their highest potential. Our next item on the agenda is our transgender, gender nonconforming, and transition students protocol workshop. So some time back, the school committee voted unanimously to take a stab at writing our own policy as opposed to this protocol. So this is going to be obviously our first workshop at it. I imagine we're going to need several. We are intended to go for till 6 o'clock tonight. So I do have another meeting. So hopefully we're going to end at that time. That being said, everybody has a copy of our current protocol in front of them. And I mean, we've talked about it. I don't think there's any need to kick this off, but I think what we can just start with is people want to start going through this protocol itself. And we can start taking notes. If there's things that you want to change, mark up, red line, anything like that, we can talk about that. But before that, I will yield to Mrs. Cook.
Before we get into the details, I just want to ask, because I've had a lot of time to think about this. We all have, because it's been so long since we tackled it. But can someone make the case for me why we need a codified policy on this versus some of the things that we currently have in place, which we know that the bathroom issue has already been addressed. The sports issue takes care of itself through, I think, of the Scholastic League. The use of pronouns is something you can't mandate because it's a First Amendment issue. The transition planning, to me, doesn't belong in the Westerly Public Schools. That should be something that's done outside the schools. Social workers would have to work with families. You can't keep that information from parents to begin with. If a child feels unsafe at home, there are recourse to go to DCF. So if I'm going to need, in order to vote for any policy, my colleagues to convince me why we need a policy, because I'm not convinced that we do. We don't have separate policies for every single type of student, so I'm not sure why this is different.
Okay. Oh, Mr. Ober.
Thank you, Christine. I was kind of thinking the same thing, but more along the lines of how is this state direction affecting the students? Are there any problems going on now that we have to address right now? So I mean, I kind of like to see, what issues we have right now. I mean, I think that would make it easier for us to see what we might want to change.
Okay. Dr. Gusso, could you speak to, have you heard of, are you aware of any issues in terms of this protocol that have been brought to you? So I guess then in terms of, well, let me think, how do I want to word this? So to try to answer Ms. Cook, your question, and I don't know if I'm right or not. I'm sure Attorney Nardone would be able to better answer this than me. But because there is guidance put out by RIDE in terms of this protocol that they've given, if in absence of a policy, then I believe that the school needs to follow the protocol set forth by RIDE. So unless there's a policy stating otherwise, then that is my understanding of it. But if anybody knows better, please, Ms. Wyckoll.
I think that the protocol from RIDE is guidance. And the last time we were issued guidance from the state was masking guidance. And we all saw the damage that did to the kids now looking back on it 3 years later. So I think this is I think Christine had a very good point that we could probably, now I know I was the one that sort of initiated, let's write our own policy instead of adopting this protocol. Maybe we don't adopt the protocol and we adjust some of our existing policies and handbook to indicate the things that are most important to us, which for me is the bathroom usage, the overnight accommodations on field trips. If we're not following this protocol and each case is looked at on a individualized case-by-case basis, where if there's a student struggling, of course, we have a spot for them to land and people to help them in the school, help direct them to where they need to go for guidance and assistance. I agree with Christine that we're spending a lot of time on this, on an issue that doesn't have anything to do with education. And, and as Christine said, if we're going to make a policy for one group of students where this protocol has never even been utilized, from what Dr. Garceau just said, why don't we just go with what we go by, is that every student is treated fairly, every student has a safe school, that bullying is bullying, period, regardless if you're, I don't know, gay, LGBTQ, or, I don't know, an anxious child or disabled or whatever the situation is. I mean, it doesn't seem to me that we should be spending this time on a policy on a topic that really needs to be handled by experts, parents, social workers, psychiatrists. And I would prefer scrap the policy and take a look at our current handbook and policies and where we can beef up for the safety of all students.
If I could just clarify, Ms. Whitewell, this protocol has been used. What I said was there haven't been any problems with it. There haven't been any issues. There haven't been any concerns raised until recently.
Go ahead, Ms. Spouty.
So, yeah, so we did adopt this, was it, I don't know if it was 16 or 17. So if there's issues with it, we would have to withdraw it and replace it with something, whether it's content found in other policies. But this is definitely an adopted protocol and it's laced with law. So I have concerns specifically about sport. But that doesn't mean I would ever vote to do anything that would go against the law. So I think we really need to look at exactly what does the law say, and if it is not woven into all the policies we have, then I think that's what we need to do, make that happen.
Ms. Dunn.
One, I want to apologize for being late, and I was listening in the car on my way here. But something I think needs to be said is, as Dr. Grosso pointed out, it has been used, and to date, there's nothing any of us are aware of that has caused some harm to a student in our district. What I think is important is, while we can say that, oh, we don't have a protocol for every single different type of child, there are groups of students who do need something in writing to reference, so that way they can reach out to the appropriate individuals. And I think it's also key to point out that I think something that happens with this is it creates a roadmap. It is a case-by-case basis. There may be a family that comes forward that says there are things in here that don't work for them. There may be a family who this is exactly what they needed to navigate this within our district. So I think we just have to keep in mind that this is kind of a good roadmap. And then obviously on a case-by-case basis, maybe we include verbiage to say that, decisions are going to be made by the family in conjunction with psychologists, social workers, whoever they do decide to pull in from the school. And something I found was Barrington Schools has a really good protocol in place that actually kind of goes through a checklist of like, okay, who at the school is aware? What are their outside resources? What is the student's plan? Do other students know about the student transitioning or that has already transitioned? What are the educators doing? What are the differences with names? And that's something that if people feel that it's, there are things being hidden from parents, that can be a part of the checklist of where are we in having the conversation with a parent? Where are we in having the conversation with other students? So I think if we are going to say that we necessarily don't need to touch this, but maybe need to create some different guidelines, a part of that may just be opening up that protocol more so we all understand what it looks like in the day-to-day when we're having those conversations in class.
So all that being said, I mean, if we wanted to, we could adjourn the meeting and not touch the protocol at all and say that, well, it'll be a case by case basis. And again, in absence of a policy that this committee has, the building administration up to Dr. Garceau's level will handle everything on a case by case basis based on the regulations that they have in their handbook and everything else. I guess that begs the question, do we want to continue to look through this protocol that we currently have in place, or do we want to let it be handled at the building level? That's my call.
I can't agree to something that's excluding the parents. And if we have to look at that one particular section in here, I also, the bathrooms and the parents and the overnight accommodations, if we're going to just let this sit, I think we need to adjust those because we can accommodate every child's bathroom needs by having a single-use bathroom in each building designated for anybody that wants extra privacy. We absolutely cannot have boys and girls sleeping together on overnight field trips. I'm sorry, that's at 13-year-old freshman. It could be with a 18-year-old senior on a field trip. I mean, this is not safe. It's not acceptable to me as a parent. And the idea of not giving a child or parents the resources to handle this all appropriately and hiding this from the parents is highly egregious. Who is going to protect, are we indemnified by RIDE if when we're sued because of something going wrong with this? This is not a school's place. This is not a school's place to replace the parents. And outing kids, I'm sorry, but if a child is that unsafe at home, then the school has to call DCYF. They are mandated reporters. If a child is seriously gender confused and wants to be this person, how can they possibly live like this for 6 hours at school and flip a switch and be someone different at home? It's completely contradictory. And so those 3 points to me are I will not give up those. So if we need to take a look piece by piece, I would spend the time to do that. If we need to look at those 3 areas, I think we should do that.
Go ahead, Mr. Ober.
Well, as the superintendent said, there hasn't been any
Sorry.
issue yet. So, I mean, there hasn't been a bathroom issue. There hasn't been a sleeping issue yet. I understand what you're saying. I can't imagine a field trip where a 13-year-old and 18-year-old will be put together regardless of their sex. Also, as far as to, inform the parent of what the student is doing. I mean, we do that and we guarantee that they won't tell anybody. It's not like if we do this policy, we'll inform the parents. It's that that child will keep it secret even in school. It won't be them flipping it off and on when they go home or not. It's that they'll only be pretending all the time. I mean, there's no good solution to that. Your change would create another problem.
Go ahead, Ms. Bowdy.
And then the other thing to remember is it's not just this situation that, the school can't share information with the parents. It's not just this, it's a whole big issue of different things that can't be shared. So that's why I kind of said, I just want to be really careful because this is all edict in law. So we don't want to, I'm not willing to vote for anything that's gonna, break the law. And, whatever we do up here, we have to have a majority vote. So I don't know what we're gonna do from here.
So again, if I could just clarify with respect to the field trips, I know it's been stated a number of times, but it's not accurate to say that students are being forced to room with students of the opposite gender or transgender students or anything along those lines. what the protocol spells out that is that if there's a field trip, a band trip, a science Olympiad out of town, whatever, and there's overnight accommodations that have to be provided, we cannot deny a transgender student the opportunity to participate in that activity. It doesn't say we have to have them room together. The reality is, any transgender kid probably would have friends that would say, sure, come room with us. If that weren't the case, what the protocol says is you need to figure it out, up to and including providing that student with their own room. So the student can't be barred from participation in the activity. That's the point here. Just as we can't bar other protected groups from participating in an activity, protocol says the district needs to figure it out. And if that means providing that student with their own room, so be it. With the lavatories, the issue is we do have gender neutral bathrooms in all of our buildings. But to dictate to any student what bathroom they have to use is going to be problematic. If the administration said to any student, you're not allowed to use the male student, you're not allowed to use the boys' bathroom anymore, that's going to be problematic. There's going to be an issue there. So those things have to be worked out and thought through. The issue of mandated reporting, Ms. Whitecall is absolutely right. If the district suspects abuse at home, we are all mandated reporters and have to report that to DCYF. But if the district is going to take the position that anytime a student confides in an educator, a counselor, a teacher, their principal, that person automatically becomes a mandated reporter about their gender identity or whether they're pregnant or not, or any of those kinds of things. That also is going to have to be worked through and thought through, because teachers would become, under the policy, as I hear it being discussed, would become mandated reporter for that kind of information as well. And that creates its own challenge.
Go ahead, Ms. Dunn.
So, two things. One, I was just going to point out something again. And obviously we're our own district, so we're not just going to take somebody else's protocol, but one of the questions asked in the Barrington packet is, what are the expectations regarding the use of facilities for any class trips? And that can be a conversation between the student, the parent, the family, and the school. And then in addition to that, my question to Ms. Wycall would be, so what is the concern, if you could verbalize it, so if there is a transgender student within our schools that does get to room with the gender that they identify with, what is it that makes you feel uncomfortable about that?
My daughter would not be sleeping with the boy in my house. She should not be sleeping with the boy on a field trip.
So then just as a quick follow-up to that, so if somebody has transitioned and you weren't aware, your child wasn't aware that they had transitioned, and this is somebody that they've befriended, that they've shared a room with, and would you feel comfortable enough if somebody said, so if you are saying you do not want your child rooming with a student who is identified as transgender, that the responsibility falls to that parent of saying to the school, my child going on a field trip, I would like them to be in a single accommodation because I'm concerned about them rooming with somebody who is transgender. That, like, for somebody who's saying that that's where they're uncomfortable with that piece of it, and then I guess it's also a question for Dr. Garceau. So could that request be made not so much of the transgender student, but then of a student who says, listen, I'm uncomfortable rooming if you can't guarantee to me that everybody who's in my room was born the sex of the individuals in our room. So would you be comfortable going to the school and saying, I want my child to have a single-use accommodation, an individual room, because I'm uncomfortable with not knowing if there's a transgender individual in the room?
I suppose so, but I still don't really see why we're creating a policy. What if are we going to make a policy for furries too? When I was subbing, there were people wearing ears and tails in the middle school. So are we going to now have to do a protocol for every identity that kids are identifying with these days?
So kind of from what you had said a little bit earlier, Ms. Wycall, about if we didn't have a policy, right, if we just went with this, there were some things in here that you weren't you didn't agree with, correct? Which is why I think, again, this committee voted to look at writing their own policy because there were some things in the protocol that some people didn't feel comfortable with. So that's kind of why we're here, is to see if we did write our own policy, what were the things we'd want to include and not include. So, so right from the start, so it's not necessarily that we're writing a policy for one particular subgroup, but we're taking a protocol that some people on the committee are not pleased with, and we want to write a policy to see if we can replace it. And just, so people know, like when we write a policy, we have to do the work of writing it, and then we have to have a first read in a public meeting before we can take any action on it, and then we would have a second read. So whatever happens up here now, or for any of these workshops that we have, nothing is stamped in and going into effect until it gets voted on in an open meeting after there's already been at least one public reading of that document. So that's kind of where we're at. So that's kind of why I had said, if we want to look at this protocol that's in place and see if there's things that we want to take out and edit. And let's be honest, this issue is relatively new to us. It definitely is very divisive just in its nature. And people take it right to heart because it's very real to people on both sides. So there's no way that this is going to be easy work by any means. And to come up with a policy that would make everybody happy would probably be impossible. But that's not to say we can't try to find some kind of common grounds here to make everybody feel at least comfortable with what's going on in the public schools. So that being said, again, if we want to start to work through this policy and see things that we might want to either edit or agree with, kind of like we would do almost with a contract, that's where I can think to start, but I'm open to other ideas as well. Ms. Cook, please.
I see Dr. Garceau as the voice of reason in all this. This guy's been in education for how long? He lives and breathes this stuff every single day. He knows what's going on. We did not have anything, so we'd never adopted this, by the way, just to correct Ms. Bowdy. This was never adopted by the school committee. This is something the superintendent told our existing school committee existed and made sure we knew that that's what we were following. Nobody cared about it. No one knew. He's been dealing with it on a day-to-day basis. Dr. Garceau, why did this come into being? Can you bring me back to 2016, 17? Were there kids being discriminated against? Is that why were there issues? And if we didn't have this, do you think educators would be treating kids poorly and not being fair to transgender kids without this?
So 2016 predates my time in the district.
Right.
But absent a protocol, every time we had a transgender or gender nonconforming student identify themselves or show up on our doorstep, we'd be making it up as we go. And it's for that reason that you have protocols drafted in writing, so that administrators, building principals, don't feel like they have to make it up every time they encounter that kind of situation, and potentially open the district up to litigation, potentially fail to meet the needs of their students. And that's why we have any protocols that we have, is so that how we handle situations as they arrive is codified and spelled out.
What litigation, you're talking about litigation from RIDE?
I'm primarily talking about litigation that would be brought by the family of any students whose rights were denied, infringed upon, or otherwise ignored. So take, for example, our special education population. It's a very litigious area, special education. There are ways that things have to be handled. There are privacy concerns, there are procedural concerns, there are notification concerns. All of that is spelled out to the nth degree, so that districts handle things appropriately in accordance with the law, in accordance with the best advice of legal counsel, educators, medical professionals, and others, so that the district doesn't mishandle those situations. This is very similar in that respect, that teams of lawyers, teams of physicians, teams of mental health counselors developed these guidance documents. Folks who do this and know this work well, and it's in protocol so that again, if a student or a family presents, we know where to go, how to handle it, what protections need to be put in place, what notifications need to be shared, all of it, because again, the alternative is making it up as you go, doing it differently every time, and potentially putting the district at risk of litigation and putting our students at risk of discrimination.
What about litigation from families that wanted to be included and are locked out of it because the school decided to not tell the parents? I mean, they could also sue us.
Potentially, but that's never happened. It's never been raised as a concern.
Has it ever happened we've been sued the other way? I mean,
No,
neither's
no, because
neither's
we followed
happened.
this protocol. We followed this protocol.
Go ahead, Ms. Dunn.
So I'm trying to find it, but I'm pretty sure there is a section in here where it does say, I hear the concern around not obviously hiding things from parents, but there is a section that says, it's about helping the student get to that place. Like the goal really is for this to be a joint effort between the student, the family, and the school. So there is language in here that does say, it's helping them get to that place of being able to have the conversation. So I think that having that verbiage in there is helpful to say that, no, the goal is to do this all together effectively, and not, thank you, and to not keep families out of the loop. And then I think too, we have to also take into account that there are, as Mr. Salino said, it's still something that people are navigating and not everybody gets it right. So that plan also looks different for every single family. There are some kids who are going to be able to go home and say, look, Mom, like I want to have this conversation with you and here's what's happening. And they're going to get on the phone with the school and it's going to be great. And then there is the very real reality of having to involve DCYF, or even just knowing that this student is going to be terrified to go home and have this, and making sure that they have the right support. So I hear what you're saying, that you don't want to exclude families and the concern around possibly a family coming after us for a legal sense, but also having that language to say, the goal is let's make sure we're doing this together. It is in there.
That is I mean, I can totally agree with that. And I guess that's my point, is the way it reads leans towards the ability to hide it. There's a section for elementary school students that's very clear about working with the family, working with the parents. It's on page 3, it's section 3A. And I mean, it clearly states, and then it goes into secondary school students, and that's where it changes. And it says, generally notification to a student's parents or guardians, blah, blah, or about their gender is unnecessary. And then at the bottom of that second paragraph under secondary school students, says if the administration determines that notifying the family carries a risk for the student, then, and then it goes on from there. But why wouldn't we have the same process for every student in the school system that is a minor? I mean, why is a 14-year-old different than a 7-year-old? And in my opinion, they're minors. They're still in their parents are still they're dependent on their parents. They're dependents. They're dependent on their guardians. And it's the same to me at 8, 6, 7, 8, 14, 15. When they're 18, it's different. I have to sign a slip for my daughter to get an Advil from the nurse. And it just doesn't make sense at all to me. I think we can adjust the wording to make it clearer.
So if we could, if I was thinking maybe we could just kind of start working our way through the document, maybe as a group, that might just be a little bit easier. So I know people have had a chance to look through this, but as you look through just the first section of the definitions, does anybody have any disagreement on what any of those definitions are in terms of if they were to exist for a policy? Anybody else? Can kind of all agree on at least the definitions that we have. So then the next section is section 3, which is on page 3. And talks about protocols for students who identify as transitioning transgender and gender nonconforming. The first part of it says the school staff will accept the student's assertion of his or her gender when there is a consistent, uniform assertion of the student or any other evidence that the student's gender identity is sincerely held. Yep, go ahead.
What if it's against a particular administrator or teacher's like religious beliefs or even personal beliefs?
I don't know.
I mean, it's a question. I don't know.
I guess I would view it, I mean, personally, I would view it as if it, well, I guess how big of a issue it would be for that person. I don't know, we'll put a question mark next to that one, I guess. So the next section is the elementary school students. So if you want to just read through just section A, just elementary. I think Ms. Wyckoff alluded to this. Any feedback on this section? Okay. So secondary students, if you want to read through that.
I would say that make it simple, just don't differentiate between the two. Just make the element, say all students, if school staff believe that a gender identity is presenting itself, just make it one. Don't differentiate between the age groups and then you solve the problem. That's the biggest sticking point we have is parental rights and trying to usurp those.
Thoughts on that? I know there's some.
I agree with that statement. And then what I had suggested was I had all students instead of separating it elementary and secondary. And then I just had a separate section that was secondary school students over the age of 18. That, just had a little bit, I guess we'd have to get Bill involved with legality of the wording, but, it kind of started off the same with that same opening of if the school staff believe that a gender identity issue is presenting itself, creating challenges. All of that was the same. Generally, notification to an adult is unnecessary as they are of legal age. However, the school shall still work as a bridge for communication between the adult student and their family. In these circumstances, the school administration should ask the superintendent for direction on how to proceed. Is kind of what I came up with, but
Okay. Other thoughts? Ms. Body, you had your hand up.
So, to Leslie's point from before, it says, situations addressed case by case require schools to balance the goal of supporting the student with the desire that parents be kept informed about their children. So the desire, yes, to be kept informed, but what I want to look at the actual language in the law, to see what we have right now. I know there's something I was looking at it earlier and I can't find it right now, but that's what I would want. And to Mrs. Whitewell's point, we need Attorney Nardone and probably another attorney involved, like Mary Ann Carroll, to make sure that we're not stepping anywhere that we shouldn't be. I mean, do we want the parents to know? Of course we do, but we have to be really careful, and that's kind of why I said earlier, there's other situations where we can't share that information either. So I think we need to really understand what the law is there.
can I ask Ms. Bowdy, what are you referring to as what other instances is the school not permitted to?
Well, Dr. Garceau just mentioned one when he said like pregnancy, things like that. I want to make really, really sure that we know exactly what the wording is.
Ms. Dunn.
So just two things. So if we do remove the separation between elementary and secondary school, I think it's wise to almost make it like a tiered system of saying like, okay, this is our goal number one is to have this conversation this way. Student, family, school, goal, that's goal number one. Based on the educators and the professionals in the school and the superintendent, this is step number two if we find that goal number one is not attainable at this time. And then, and I don't know if we already maybe have a document like this, but if we do have a document, because like this one from Barrington, literally there's a question that says, are the parents and guardians of the student aware and supportive of the child's gender status? Yes or no? And then the next thing is, if no, what considerations? And it really just kind of gives that, again, a roadmap. So I feel like maybe this would also help our conversation if we do have some existing paperwork like this, obviously without student information, but just the blank template of like, you know, what are some of those questions that are being asked? And how do we get to a place where it's saying, yes, we're telling the parents tomorrow. No, we're telling the parents in 6 months pending this, this, and this. I think that would also be helpful in deciding how to move forward with this section of the protocol.
And you said that was Barrington?
Yeah.
Yeah, that could be helpful. Other thoughts on this section in terms of that? I know the parent notification is, it's a big sticking point for a lot of people. And it is curious, I don't know how it falls legally, honestly. You know, I mean, to Ms. Wyckoff's point, if somebody's supposed to be at a dance and they don't show up, you get a phone call saying they bought a ticket for the dance and they didn't show up. Where are they? So I don't know how we make that determination of, we have to notify this, but we don't have to notify that. It, it doesn't seem clear, or maybe not in the best interest, always safe. All right, anything else on this section? So number 2 on this one, when a student has expressed an intent to transition, in order to ensure the school is supportive and safe environment, the school department shall develop a gender transition plan for the student, which adheres to the following resources. Make them available to parents and students who have additional questions or concerns. Privacy. Ensure the privacy of students who are transitioning to the extent that the student desires. It reads on transgender and gender nonconforming students have the ability at all students to discuss and express their gender identity and expression openly and decide when, with whom, and how much of their private information to share with others. Yeah, this is work, so you can
The-
pop right in there.
Yep, the only thing that I think, and that's the top number 2, when a student has expressed an interest to transition, in order to ensure that the school is supportive and safe environment, the school department shall, instead of develop, because we do not have the quote unquote experts on our staff, I think the school department can agree to a gender transition plan, which adheres to the following protocol. And that meaning that this student is referred to experts outside the school that know how to work up a transition plan. Who do we have that's knows how to work a transition plan?
Dr. Garceau, any thoughts on that? Ms. Wyckoff's
Well,
point?
again, if I was to use the special ed analogy, we develop plans for kids all the time. And we do have people within the district that have had training on this issue, and we do have people who have developed plans that have been implemented very successfully in our buildings. If you allow outsiders to present the district with a plan, there's the potential that that plan is beyond our capabilities to carry out. It could also not take into context or into consideration the local context. We know our buildings, we know our teachers, we know our kids. So I wouldn't feel comfortable being bound by a plan developed by an outside agency or anyone else, whether it's for this or special education or a 504 plan or anything, to be honest.
Why can't this then fall under the director of student personnel, pupil and personnel, if they're handling all of these cases, why can't, under the special ed, why couldn't we just have a section of something like this then?
Well, again, I use special education only as an analogy because we go through a lot of the same processes, but these students are not learning disabled. And that's the simplest answer.
Um, Following on here on the privacy, school department works closely with student and family in devising an appropriate plan regarding confidentiality of the student's transgender or gender nonconforming status that works for both the student and the school. School personnel should not disclose information that may reveal a student's transgender status unless legally required to do so or unless the student has authorized such disclosure. Thoughts on that? None? Oh, okay. So go on to C on page 5. If you want to just read that.
On page 5, under B, and then the first bullet, again, just the wording, if really our goal is that the families are involved, then why do we have a parentheses in there that says, if the family is involved?
I'm sorry, where are you? Oh,
I'm on B, C, B, the
Oh.
first bullet.
oh, I'm still, I got you.
I mean, it's just little things like that. If we delete that parentheses, then we're assuming the family knows, and that's, I think, where our stand needs to be.
Go ahead, Ms. Byerly.
Oh, I guess it's on. And to Mrs. Wyckoff's point, once we find out what the exact language is and what protections the students are afforded, depending on their age, then we can, maybe make changes like that. But I think all of that will have to be, decided after we know exactly what the language.
I'm still on names and pronouns.
The next section that I had questions about was the dress code. We have a dress code section of the handbook. I don't even see, it probably wouldn't even need to be mentioned again. I mean, the first sentence, schools enforce the dress code pursuant to the school department policy.
Mm-hmm.
That's all we need there.
Seems straightforward to me too. Good, Ms. Bowdy.
So if we're gonna look at that, we need to, bring that policy too and review that.
I think we
We
just
just did
approved
it.
the handbook.
But
Dress
that,
code would have been in the handbook.
but at all levels,
It should be in all there. Should be in
take a look.
all the handbooks. Go ahead, Ms. Dunn.
I was just gonna say, similar to what Ms. Bowdy was saying, if that change were to be made, then I think we would just want to probably review, even though we just did it, but if we were gonna take out language, then we'd want to review the policy we do have in place about the dress code, just to make sure that we're not setting a student up for a bad situation. Like especially I think the line that says school staff shall not enforce a dress code more strictly against transgender or gender nonconforming students than other students. We would just want to make sure that we're not putting students in a place where, you know, they may be judged harshly or something said because based on what our dress code says, maybe doesn't support their gender identity.
I do think that correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Goss, so dress codes are gender neutral, right? They're different. They're not different for boys or girls, right? They're all the same.
To a degree, we don't address crop tops for boys as a rule, but they are pretty much the same, and we try to stay away.
Right, but I mean, but does the language,
Yeah, it's pretty generic.
right?
It's pretty generic, but if I guess the language here is if people perceived to be a male student showed up to school in traditionally female clothes, is that student going to be disciplined? Who's going to be a responsibility for that? I think that, again, that's why it's in here.
I'm just thinking, like, I know, like in our dress code, like we have it worded as, you know, for tops, it's armpit to armpit, covers the torso. Doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl. We don't use like crop top or that kind of term because it's more gender specific. So it's just covers this for everyone. Okay, I guess we could look at that. And we're coming up on about 5 minutes left. So you have our restroom, locker room, and changing facilities policy, part of this, F. I should go quick. Yeah. Anybody who wants to.
Yeah, so this was the section that I didn't completely rewrite it, but the wording that, or something to this effect. Address, the restroom, locker room, changing facility. All students are entitled to have access to restrooms, locker rooms, and changing facilities that are sanitary, safe, adequate, so that they can comfortably and fully engage in their school programs and activities. Any student who expresses a need or desire for increased privacy should be provided reasonable alternative arrangements. Reasonable alternative arrangements may include the use of private areas or a separate changing schedule or the use of a single stalled restroom. Any alternative arrangement for transgender or gender nonconforming or transitioning student should be provided in a way that protects the student's ability to keep his or her transgender status confidential if he or she so chooses. So I kind of took some out and added some, and I don't know, again, that's just the gist of my thoughts.
Right. But of course, the issue is on the A and the B of that, of the ability to use the locker room or facility of how they identify. Am I right on that? Yeah. Thoughts?
I didn't hear what you said.
I'm looking at A and B. That's where the kind of, I think, the crux of the issue is on this one. Go ahead, Ms. Bowdy.
So on this one, again, not to sound like a broken record, but it comes down to the law. What does the law say? So if a transgender student knows that a single use or unisex bathroom is available to them as it is to everyone, but really chooses to go into the restroom of the sex that they identify as, gender they identify as, what does the law say? Do we have the right to say, oh, no, you can't go in the girls' room because you're biologically a male? I mean, I don't know the answer, so definitely need to know what the law says exactly.
I believe this document was written by Mary Ann Carroll.
And it was, I think Dr. Garcelle mentioned earlier, there's a whole bunch of different professionals in different, disciplines. So I would assume that this document is the culmination of a bunch of, experts on the subject, which none of us are, so.
Right. Other thoughts on this? I know this is, it's kind of a big area where there's a lot of a disagreement on. And so how do you make a policy that's going to make anybody happy in that case? I don't know. Maybe the answer is not to have any multi-use bathrooms. Maybe we should get rid of boys' rooms and girls' rooms and just have all single-use stalls. And then we don't have to worry about that. I don't know. But I feel like this is going to be a lot of spinning in the mud here for a while. Okay, any other thoughts before we adjourn the meeting at this time? Okay, so obviously we'll have to have more work on this. We have other pages to go through and other thoughts. I guess we'll need to get some other people involved as well, so we can hear what they have to say. But we have some work. So I'll seek a motion to adjourn. Second?
Second.
It's done. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.